Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I've got another Master Duel video for you all. So, today we're going to be talking about branded Tearlaments once again. But as you can see, this build is quite a bit different from the last iteration that we saw, and any other iterations I've made before as well. This might actually be the first 60-card Tearlament deck I've played on the channel. I'm trying to remember, I think it might be. I don't remember quite off the top of my head, but this is a list of branded Tearlaments that I actually worked on with one of my patrons, Onslaught, who had joined my coaching tier recently. He came to me asking if we could work on a list for branded Tearlaments, and it's actually, you know, I'd been wanting to work on this deck more myself anyway. So I was like, yeah, why not? We can totally hash out a list. So during our coaching session, which if you're curious about that, feel free to check out the link to my Patreon in the description below. And there you'll find information about not only the regular tier where you get access to additional daily Master Duel content that sometimes it doesn't get posted on the YouTube channel, sometimes it's previews, sometimes I do Q&As. We have all kinds of exclusive content over there. And then we also have a coaching tier as well, where in addition to all that additional content, you also get a 60-minute coaching session for every month that you renew there as well. So during that session, like I said, we cracked out this deck here, and it's a really sweet build. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to take credit for it, even myself, honestly, because really it was Onslaught and I feel we worked together to arrive at this build. One of the key things that he kind of introduced to me that I hadn't really considered in branded Tearlaments is the idea of fusion deployment. So fusion deployment, for those who are unfamiliar with this card, is an ultra rare, but it is from the Cyber Dragon structure deck. So if you want to get your hands on a playset, super easy. It's just 1500 gems if you don't already have the Cyber Dragon structure decks. But Fusion Deployment is a card available in that deck, and by its effect, you reveal a fusion monster from your extra deck, and then you can special summon from your hand or deck one of the materials whose name is specifically listed on the card. The drawback is that you can only fusion summon for the rest of the turn. So, this card is really cool. I actually really like it in branded Tearlaments, because it not only allows us to grab Tearlament's Rhinoheart by revealing the Kaleidoheart, but we also have the potential to grab Albaz by revealing, well, you know, any number of these, well, any number of these 3 fusion monsters, really. But yeah, it also doesn't even just search it. It actually special summons it right out from the deck. Now, again, you can't summon except for fusion summoning the turn you play it, but that's really not that big of a deal in this deck, especially if you look at the extra deck. A lot of our non-fusion stuff is, like, not necessarily niche stuff, but, like, they're not cards that come up every single turn. So it's really not hard to just continue your plays while under the effect of fusion deployment. And of course, the ability to grab Rhinoheart is really big, especially in a 60-card deck. I actually ended up mathing it out, and with the 3 fusion deployment, in addition to Rhoda, Terraforming, Perla Rhino, and Foolish Burial Goods, as well as the Rhinohearts themselves, basically all the ways to directly search Rhinoheart, you actually still have a little over a 60% chance of opening Rhinoheart, even the 60-card deck, which is only a few percent less than my 40-card regular Ishizu Tearlament build. So that's pretty rad. That's pretty rad that, you know, there's that big of a difference. Like, obviously 40 to 60 card decks, huge difference, but we still have the same consistency when it comes to opening our key play of Rhinoheart. But even if we don't open Rhinoheart, we still have a decent chance to open Aliver or find it via branded opening as well. And Aliver is also, of course, an excellent normal summon for this deck, being able to grab branded fusion. I'm assuming most of us have played against branded Despia and just know how good that is. We are playing a relatively minimal Despia package still. I did decide to throw in Guardian Chimera because we are rocking Branded in red and the Ad Libitum as well. We don't really go out of our way to go into that line like we would in a normal branded Despia deck, but it's like, if it comes up, it's good. One of the cards in this extra deck I've actually really been liking is Predaplant Vert Anaconda, and it's like, duh, Lex, we all know Vert is a good card. But in this deck in particular, like in this 60-card branded Tearlament deck, it's not hard to get 2 effect monsters on the board, even if you're bricked up, and that can just lead straight to a play right there. I mean, that's often just like something as simple as like Keldo plus a fairy to discard, right? The other thing that I really like about Vert Anaconda in this deck is that, in addition to being useful when you're bricked up, sometimes, and we're actually going to see an example of this in the gameplay coming up, sometimes you can do your full Tearlament combo, right? and then still have 2 effect monsters left over by the end of it. Like, once you've done all your tier plays, and then at the end you just get to be like, oh, by the way, Link, Vert, Branded Fusion, Mirror Jade. Like, just casually throwing a Mirror Jade at the end of your tier limit board is very, very powerful. Now, I will say, I kind of have to throw out this caveat, I feel like, with not just this, but I think any tier limit variant. I don't think it's quite as good as a Shizu tier limits. I do think that is just still the best, variant of tier limits, but I don't think that this particular build is very far behind at all. And it does have some advantages that the, other builds don't, namely the access to the branded package there, as well as, of course, that grass looks greener, the whole reason you would even want to go up to 60 cards in the first place. But I think that's a given. We all know that, right, by this point. So, yeah, even then, like, even though we have 60 cards, this is definitely one of those 60 card decks where we did not struggle to get up to 60, and in fact, had to trim things back. Like, when Onslaught and I were initially working on this build, I wanted to throw in, like, dramaturge, I wanted to throw in a theater, I wanted to throw in, like, a comedy, 3 tragedy, like, all the branded stuff, like I usually like to do in my 60-card branded Despia decks. But again, just because we have the tier limits and the Ishizus here as well, we just have to kind of, like, trim back on the branded stuff a little bit. But I still think this deck does have a strong branded identity, and I think it's still really, really good in this meta. Not still, I think it is just really, really good in this meta. And Fusion Deployment, again, I don't know if I would play this in, like, regular tier limits. Like, I think that might be a bit excessive, but yeah, if you're playing, like, even I think without the brandeds, if you're playing a 60-card, like, tier limit build, period, I think the Fusion Deployment is definitely worth considering, in addition to any other search options you may have for the Rhinoheart there. So, that's everything I wanted to mention as far as the build itself goes. Let's go ahead and break it down card by card, and then we're going to look at some gameplay. So, we're on 2 Despian Tragedy, 3 Max C, 2 tier limits Merly, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 tier limits Havnus, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 2 Fallen of Albaz, 2 Alibur the Jester of Despia, 2 tier limits Shiren, 3 tier limits Rhinoheart, 2 Kaldo the Sacred Protector, 3 Mudor the Sword Oracle, 2 Kelbek the Ancient Vanguard, 1 Agito the Ancient Sentinel, 1 Ad Libitum of Despia, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Reinforcement of the Army, 1 Terraforming, 1 Foolish Burial Goods, 2 That Grass Looks Greener, 3 Fusion Deployment, 3 Branded Fusion, 1 Primeval Planet Perlerino, 3 Tier Limit Scream, 1 Cross-Out Designator, 2 Branded Opening, 2 Branded in Red, 3 Infinite Permanents, 1 Branded Banishment, 1 Tier Limits Crime, and then finally 2 Tier Limits Solic. There is our 60-card main deck. For the extra deck, we're playing 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp, 1 Tier Limits Kitkalos, 1 Predoplant Dragostapelia, 1 Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 Mirror Jade the Iceblade Dragon, 1 Lubellion the Searing Dragon, 1 Tier Limits Rolkalos, 1 Guardian Chimera, 1 Tier Limits Kaleidoheart, 1 Abyss Stroller, 1 Baguska the Terribly Tired Tapir, 1 Divine Arsenal, Zeus Sky Thunder, 1 Predoplant Vert Anaconda, 1 Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy, and then finally a copy of Sprite Elf. There is our list. Now let's take a look at some gameplay. Okay, so these games were, once again, played in the WCS qualifiers, so unfortunately do not have access to who I was playing against. This was actually, these games I think came just after I hit DL Max. I think these were the second stage games, if I recall correctly. So, I'm going to start by using the Rhoda for the Rhinoheart. Might look a little weird because we already opened Rhinoheart, but if my opponent has an Ash Blossom they want to use on a Rhoda, I would be glad to give them that opportunity here. So, going to set off the Merly. I'll fuse it with the Rhinoheart in hand because I don't really have any plans with it, and I already have Rhinoheart on board anyway. Or I'd want to keep the Rhinoheart on board to potentially use to make like a rank 4 or something. So, Kaleidoheart's going to get Merly. We're going to mill 8. We've all seen this by this point. You know what's happening here, so let's see what 8 cards we end up milling off the top. This is going to be a little bit more dicey in a 60-card deck to try to hit a tier limit name, but we do still have plenty of other things to hit as well, like this Despian Tragedy here. So, and then the Scream as well to grab a Crime. Gonna go ahead and grab the Alibur. Next, I'm going to fire off the Shiren's effect. I'll just toss this Falcon of Albaz here. That does actually manage to catch a Havnus, so that's pretty good. We can go ahead and go into our Rolkalos. So this is already looking like a great setup. We've got Rolkalos, Solic, and Crime. That's already probably going to be enough. We can even give our Rolkalos some targeting protection with Elf. And just like I talked about in the deck profile, I'm going to now also be able to, in addition to this already great board that I've set up, we can incidentally also just go for Ver Anaconda. And like I said, it's like, you know, now we're just like, alright, by the way, in addition to all this tier limit stuff, pay 2,000, Mira Jane. So, and that we can also give targeting protection with our Sprite Elf. So this is definitely what I would call an ideal turn 1 with this deck. Absolutely beautiful. And honestly, our mills were about average too. Like, 1 tier limit name, a Fuser, and 11 cards in a 60 card deck. Not bad. I think that's not bad at all. So, but it's going to start off with a Danger Thunderbird. They actually end up pitching the same copy as well. So they're going to end up targeting my tier limits Crime. I'm going to let that resolve. There's not really a point to activating it since it's going to get destroyed anyway, so that's definitely fine. Oh, also, obviously, now I've figured out we're up against blind second 8 axes here, so Poe's going to special summon Alpha, attempt to activate the effect. We've got a Solaic to fire off in response to that, so off goes the Merly, and then we get to, of course, fuse with the Merly because we've used Solaic's effect. Poe's going to try to use an Iris Sword Soul here, but I'm just going to go ahead and use Roll Close to just put a stop to that right now. Alright, so there's the Iris Sword Soul. I'll get rid of my Solaic. I've already used it this turn, so I won't need it again. And we get to search as well. And I'm going to go for a Kaleidoheart to put this Alpha back. Just want to make sure that we're, like, layering our disruptions in a way that, like, we're still feeding into, like, having more disruptions. And what I mean by layering is, like, just using your disruptions in a mindful manner, right? Like, you're not just absent-mindedly throwing out, like, Mira Jade's Banish here for no reason. We do still have that available. And then in addition to that, we are using, of course, the Kaleidoheart to put back the Alpha, and Solaic even gets to grab us Havadis for another potential disruption here. So, a lot going on with this turn. Opponent's going to throw out a Gizmek Orochi. That's totally fine, as well as the Grand Maju. Grand Maju is only at 3,200, but all the same, I'm still going to use Mira Jade to just go ahead and banish it. The Gizmek is free to battle over the Sprite Elf. I don't need it anymore. And the Albion we sent gets us the Branded in red. So, we're already looking really, really good. The one, I will say, kind of drawback of how light of a Branded engine that we're playing is, as you can see, I Alibird for Branded Fusion. This Branded Fusion actually isn't live anymore, just because we're out of stuff to fuse with, so that can happen kind of quickly sometimes, as it did in this game, but it's not a huge issue I've run into in testing, and if it does, we can add more of a Branded engine. That shouldn't be too difficult, so I'm going to go for the Guardian Chimera here, even though it's not able to attack directly. To still just blow up the Gizmek Orochi and then just attack directly with everything else. And get a couple of draws for good measure, why not? And there we have it. There is that duel. Again, that is absolutely an ideal game, right? I like to show off at the start of each video what I think an ideal turn, if possible, would look like, you know, with the deck, and I definitely think we've established that here. Again, we see that we not only have the tier limits, which are the tier limits, need no further explanation than that, but we were also very easily able to pivot into a branded play to get out the Mira Jade as well. Very, very nice. So we, of course, still have a few more games to take a look at. Let's go straight into this next one here. Okay, let's see what we end up going up against here. I do know that one of these duels we will just show off Fusion deployment in action as well. I just don't quite recall which one off the top of my head. So we're going second this time, up against another 60-card deck, as you can see. Not a bad going second hand. We have the Kelbeck and the Imperm for disruption, and we even also have a Fallen of Albaz here to potentially take advantage of some of our opponents' cards on board. We can start fusing with them. So we're also up against branded tier limits. It's direct mirror match here, not just we're both playing tier limits. The Fallen of Albaz, if you're going to fuse on a tier limit monster, I think you still have to be a little bit careful. If it's like, because if it's like Super Poly, which I think it is, it's still getting sent to the graveyard by an effect. So, I mean, that would be like any fusion card, right? So, yeah. Alright, so we did have the Imperm for the Kiklos, that's good. We have a Keldo and a couple of back rows to deal with here. So, I'm going to start by using Keldo to pitch this Kelbeck, and then I'm going to activate the effect. I am, in fact, going to get it twisted here with this kind of a hand, just because, you know, Grass doesn't do anything here. I think we do have a 1-card difference. No, we don't even have that, so nope, Grass just doesn't do anything here. The other cool thing is that by using Kelbeck, I also get to proc my own second Kelbeck in hand, which will let me bounce the Kiklos. That was actually really crucial, and more than getting it twisted was the main reason I even activated Keldo there, was to, again, trigger the effect of the Kelbeck in my hand, because now that Kiklos is gone and shuffled back into the extra deck, if my opponent has a face-down Solaic that is no longer live, Although I think they would have used it here probably, unless I have a Shuffler in the yard, which I don't. So I don't think either of these is going to end up being Solaic, but it also makes their Purloin just a little bit less likely to be live, as they don't have any Tyro names in their graveyard, and they can't really go for like real close anymore, so that can't stop me now either. So now we get to add an Aliber, and our opponent is going to in fact get to blow up one of our cards with the Purloin, but that is not a big deal at all. I can just normal summon Aliber, and then my opponent's just going to concede. It's a direct mirror match, so I imagine they know what's coming after this, right? Like, I'm just going to grab Branded Fusion and then start making some pretty wicked plays. So, yeah, good stuff there. So, we still have a couple more duels to watch. I'm going to go straight into the next one here. I believe this is another game where I end up going second, if I recall correctly. I'm kind of just basing that off the turn count, because it's 2. And usually if it's 2, yeah. Usually if it's 2, that means I won on the crackback going second. So, here we have another hand of opening Kelbeck and Imperm in order to get a little disruption going on, so that's pretty rad. Opponent's going to start with a Nimble Beaver, and I am going to Imperm it. I actually did debate about this, though, and I don't know if I know, honestly, off the top of my head, which is right. I should know this, but, like, if it's better to Imperm the Nimble Beaver or to wait for the Gigantic Sprite. See, the problem is, though, like, if they don't go for Gigantic Sprite because they have other plays in their hand and it's something that's going to catch you off guard, that's just kind of what I was worried about and why I Imperm the Nimble Beaver here. I guess the reason to wait for a Gigantic Sprite would be to waste the Sprite in their extra deck if you thought the game was going to go on long, which I don't, with this hand, honestly, I don't particularly think it is. And on top of that, it would be potentially useful to stop them from summoning some of the sprites in their hand. With Gigantic Sprite out, they can't summon Red or Carrot. Those need a level or link to, specifically. I don't know, it just seems kind of niche, right? So I don't think it, like, super duper matters. I'm sure one is technically correct, but I just decided to Imperm the Nimble Beaver here, so there's that. Pretty quick negate there. And then they don't really have any follow-up plays after that. I just took that one disruption, which is nice. So, if my opponent had followed up with a Sprite Blue or something, that would have been problematic. But, again, not have to worry about it. So, let's go start by firing off a Max C. I'm completely fine with this, though. This is not going to stop me, like, even the slightest for a couple of reasons, actually, that I do want to address. Because this is something I talked about in my Choke Points video a little bit, but something I've wanted to expand on for quite a while. It could even be its own video, like, when do I play into Max C and when do I stop? That's actually a fairly common question I see. And if it's turn 2 and you have the attack, you think it's typically right to play into Max C. It definitely depends on deck-to-deck, scenarios to scenario. Here, I'm so fine playing into Max C for a few reasons. One, we're in tier limit format. Nibiru does not exist right now, so I'm not going to get punished by that. 2, my opponent has a card in play, so they can't use the Imperm to stop me, which means really Ash Blossom is about all they can do. And 3, with this hand, I am very confident I can pretty easily end the duel on this turn. So, with those 3 factors in mind, like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and start plowing through this Max C. And also because we know our opponent is not on a tier limit variant, we get to freely activate our Millers, which it always feels like a special treat when that happens. I'm so used to just not activating Millers, either against the mirror or going first blind. There's very few scenarios where I would proactively want to activate a Miller blind going first. But yeah, my opponent's not going to wait for me to finish out the turn. They're just going to concede. I think they had ultimately realized the same thing, well, that I just said, right? That, you know, without their access to stuff like Nibiru and Imperm, with really only the potential to draw like Ash Blossom, maybe DD Crow if they're playing it, to stop me, there's really not that much they can do, even with the power of Max C. Max C is really interesting in this meta, right? It feels a lot different, because before, people were playing Nibiru, because it was actually good to, and you had that threat, even if you were reasonably certain you could OTK, and you had the attack, you still had that threat of, like, they couldn't Nibiru me, and I could just lose. So, yeah, Max C is different in this format. I don't think it's any better. I still don't like the card, but it does play out very differently. And that is something important to keep in mind from meta to meta. So we have one more duel to show off. Let's go ahead and go straight into it. All right, our final game is going to be definitely a bit longer than those last 2 there. So this should be the game where we end up showing off Fusion Deployment. As you can see, I opened a lot of really monster-heavy hands. I feel like Alibur and Chiron are kind of glued to my hand in this play session here. Not that I'm complaining about that in any regards. I would absolutely play this deck all the time if I knew I was going to open Alibur and Chiron in every opening hand. I would definitely play this deck a lot more, so. We do not, unfortunately, though, have any disruption here, which is a little bit dicey. As our opponent is doing some regular tier 1 plays. I also saw, yeah, both Eudora and Kelbeck go to that graveyard, or Keldo, rather, so. That's definitely a bit of a yikes. No, gonna have to deal with the Shufflers, rather. Opponent's gonna fire off the Kelbeck. I don't blame them for that, not against a 60-card deck. A 60-card deck, it is decently likely that they're playing tiers, but at the same time, actually, you know what? I will offer a minor criticism here. Because 60-card decks are often, one, playing tier limits, and two, even if they're not definitely graveyard focused in themselves. I said it was fine for my opponent to activate Kelbeck, and here's the thing. If you need to activate a Miller against a 60-card deck for plays, I think that's generally fine, because again, even if they're playing tier limits, they just have like such a fewer chance to actually hit a Fuser name that it tends not to punish you as much. However, where I think my opponent may have made a slight mistake was the fact that they already milled Chiron, right? And they already have a Fuser here. I don't really know what else my opponent expects to mill in this 5 off Kelbeck. Like, especially what could be milled here that's worth milling. Because, like, as you can see, they're going to give me a Rhinoheart Summon, a Solic Search, and a Scream Search all in one here. And there was no reason for them to do that. Like, what did they even mill? I mean, they built a Fairy Tale Snow, which is fine, but, like, I don't think it was necessarily worth, like, the risk at all. I don't think it was worth the risk at all, to be honest. Like, that is something that I see a complaint about tier limits, and I've already addressed this in a recent video, but a complaint I see about tier limits quite a bit is that, like, you know, they talk about how, some people rather will talk about how tier limits are all about getting lucky with the millers, but this is a prime example of what I meant when I said, like, tier limits are not at all focused on the millers. I think that's a huge misconception, that, like, you need to use a miller to get your play started to have, like, a chance, right? I don't think that's right at all. By the way, also, my opponent's setup here looks a little bit scary with the Roll Close and the Dweller. I'm actually totally fine with this, because this is a prime board for my opponent to get hit with a Dweller Zeus combo, so that's pretty much my plan here, is I'm just going to try to go for Dweller Zeus. That does mean I need to bait out the Roll Close and a potential face-down Solic first. That's why I proc the Havness there in response to Dweller's effect, right, was to just see if my opponent would use the Roll Close effect. So, they don't. I do get a special Agita, though, because cards went from my deck to the graveyard. I'm going to use that in Rhinoheart to make my own Dweller. I go to battle over the Merly, and I get to detach the Dweller. I actually want to talk about this interaction for a second here, because this looks pretty simple. It's like, oh, they're just Solicing the Dweller, but there was a lot more to this interaction here than it might seem on the surface. So, I went to battle Dweller into Solic, right? Or into the Merly. Pretty much into Solic, because I knew my opponent had a face-down Solic. And I'm thinking to myself, right? If my opponent chooses not to activate Solic and waits for me to activate Dweller's effect to negate it, that's fine, because I'll still go for Zeus. They'll get the Roll Close effect and the Solic Search, which is not ideal, but they won't have a Dweller to help them on their turn. And I still have 5 cards in my hand. Like, I definitely still have card advantage here. So that's definitely grounds for you to come back, especially when 2 of the cards are Havness and Solic, even more disruption, right? The other thing I was thinking is, if my opponent does choose to activate the Solic here, it's going to be a little bit of an issue, which as you can see, they did choose to activate it. That's actually a little bit more of an issue, because even though I get to chain Dweller in response and just resolve the effect, now they get to sack off their Merly, and by negating my Dweller, they actually take away its attack bonus, as we're about to see here as I hit play. So now I have a choice, and I am going to choose to just crash mine and my opponent's Dwellers here. I've got a special a Chiron, but my opponent's got a Roll Close effect in response. It's kind of surprising, to be honestly, but completely fine. Given that I'm under Dweller, I was only trying to set up the Chiron with the Solic, just to have a live Solic target. Maybe my opponent, that's why they negated, which would be a very good read on their part if true. But yeah, I don't know. Unless I searched it, then it wouldn't necessarily be a read. Now, would it? I milled Scream, I searched it, so they knew. Never mind. Not sure why they didn't battle with Snow, given they activated during the battle phase, but that's fine. Here's the fusion deployment. Cool. So, gonna start with Shyren. I'm actually doing this on purpose to proc the Rolclos effect for 2 reasons. 1, to proc the Havnus effect, as you saw here, and 2, so that way they don't hit my Fallen of Albaz when I go to activate that effect. It also triggers the Shyren, which is pretty rad. They are going to bring back their Rolclos. They've got the Shuffler. That's completely fine. Because I don't actually need a Tear Fuser to win this game. As soon as this Chain Link finishes resolving, they even brought back the Kleidaheart, or the Rolclos just for me. How kind. So, here's Fusion Deployment. Here's Albaz. Beautiful way to use Albaz's effect. And my opponent's just going to concede on the spot. But because Rolclos already used its effect, it's no longer Fusion Summoned, which means it can't come back again, which is rad. And then, of course, I get a Mirror Jade, I get to banish their thing, battle over another one of their things, and then I get a search during the end phase for a set Branded in red, and at that point, it's pretty much over, especially given that I have a Life Soliac up as well. So, yeah, that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. I got to give a special thanks here to Onslaught, as well as all of my patrons that you're going to see credited at the end of the video. But again, this was Onslaught's deck that we worked on during our coaching session here. So, yeah, that's pretty much going to go ahead and do it. So let's just move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There, for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack, you'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now, so without further ado, this is Hexlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.